Okay, so here's the timesheet. Now, so what you see is she's basically got each of these sort of like rows is a day, okay, and you've got in blue is projected time, like time that she's planning to work, and this is the name of the human that is going to do this work. Now, if you know the name of the person, then great, put their name there. Otherwise, you can just call them, person 1, person 2, person 3, however many people you're going to.
Human. Have you ever made a timesheet for a non-human?
No. So that's what the blue is. So like here's an example where she said, okay, well on this day we're gonna do, we're gonna work 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. With a meeting with the designer to sort of go through what we need to do. Well, that meeting ended up taking 2 hours longer than was predicted. Okay, so great, lesson learned. When I'm working with this person, I know those conversations take longer, so I should plan accordingly. Okay. And then we've got sort of like the total time every week, right? So you've got projected, it was supposed to be 3 hours this week. Actual, I ended up at 39, okay? And then we've got every week, here's the total number of hours I worked every day in that week, okay? You see that? So we're trying to keep track of, what did I think that person would do that day? What did they actually do that day? And how does that translate into the number of hours each week I'm working then? Because generally speaking, you're kicking into overtime based on usually hours per week. There are some agreements that also limit you on number of hours per day, but that's usually not where you get yourself in trouble, because there really are only so many hours in the day, and eventually people just like crash. Okay, so it's usually when you get yourself into an overtime problem, it's happening when you look at it as on a weekly basis. That maybe on any given day they're not doing, they're maybe only doing 10 hours of work in a day, which is okay for somebody to do. But if they're doing that every day, if they do that for 5 days in a row, that's 50 hours in a week, and that might be more than what you're supposed to do. So that's usually where it's like an extra hour every day is enough to put you into overtime by the end of the week. Okay, if you're not careful. Okay, so the other thing that I like to have people do is, and this is in some ways kind of just the nature of sound, and this is and this helps to also account for just students still learning, but working in sound is a lot. I call it hurry up and wait. We do a lot of hurrying up and then waiting, because we can't always work. A lot of the things we have to do have to be done under very certain circumstances, and those circumstances aren't always available. For example, if you want to, go through your sound cues and mix levels and all that kind of stuff, it's hard to do that when they're building the set on the stage, because that's usually a noisy time and a noisy experience, and that's hard to do that work then. So there's times when other people can work, but it's difficult for us to work. And our process, sometimes things change for sound much later in the process than other things. It's really hard to change your mind about the set after it's been built, right? Because it takes a lot of time and a lot of hours and a lot of money to build a set. But to change your mind on something about sound is usually not as expensive. Okay? So when you get into tech rehearsals, for example, it's not uncommon for the sound to change every day. Because it usually it's a lot easier to change than it is to change the costumes, for example, because they've been built, right? But to change the sound cues, no problem. It's easy. Like, okay, I could, yeah, sure, give me 5 minutes. I can edit that or come up with something else and put it in there, and it's fine. And we can usually make that change without having to like stop and start completely over on the show and everything. So, so that's the other thing that gets in our way is that not only are we limited about when we can actually do things, but also the very nature of our process means that there are periods of time when our work is very intense, right? Because when we get into the tech rehearsal, that's a very intense week for us, because we are not only finally doing work that we haven't been able to do yet, right? Because it's just hard to do that work, some of that work, without actors on stage and in quiet rooms and all of that kind of all the systems. So it's a very intense period of time, but also it's intense because we also are rapidly changing things all the time. Okay? So that's just the nature of what we do, which means because of how our stuff happens, it isn't always completely in our control to stay completely away from overtime. Right? It's really hard for sound and lighting people, for example, to completely avoid overtime when you get into a tech week, for example. Just because of those two things. It's like, well, we couldn't have started sooner because we didn't have all of the variables in place in order to start. We couldn't actually even start this work until this day. And then things are rapidly changing, so it just means that it's not usually, it's very difficult for us and lighting as well to stay out of overtime when you get into something like a tech week. Very hard. So what I like to have you guys do is look at your average weekly hours. So because there might be a week where you definitely go into overtime, right? But if all those other times when we're maybe doing more waiting than we are doing hurrying up, then people aren't working then. And so if you've budgeted a certain number of weekly hours during the waiting periods, maybe you're not paying those people, which means that money then that you had budgeted goes into the pot to maybe cover some of the overages later. Okay? So if you track average weekly hours, you're saying as you're predicting out what this is going to be, take a look at that average and say, okay, so maybe there's some weeks where I'm over, but there's some weeks where I'm under as well. How is that averaging out? Am I still averaging out to the 20 or 30 hours a week that I'm allowed to work as one of these people? And if you are, then you're probably okay, right? Things will kind of even out. Yes, the overtime is more expensive, but hopefully you've budgeted a little bit of, contingency to deal with that. And as long as you're if you predict it out and you're predicting accurately and you're seeing that on average I'm sitting in the right place, even if some weeks are over and some weeks are under, then usually you're good. That's good enough to move forward and not be too worried about running out of money to pay people. Okay? So that is not accounted for in this particular timesheet. But the downside to doing it this way is this looks nice, I guess, but it's very labor intensive to build it this way because you have to do all the math manually, right? Because all you're doing is you're just like filling in cells on a spreadsheet and then you're like, okay, counting the hours, right? And then you're adding all that up in here. And that's very difficult. That's labor intensive. Yes?
Is there I don't know if this is something you can do, but if you could do conditional highlighting and then it would add up what's highlighted, or is that not something you can do in Excel?
You probably could do that. Maybe.
Yeah.
I've never tried it that way. But anyway, I've been kicking this around because I've been trying to think of a better way to do it. And here's kind of what I came up with, and I want you guys to play with this. I'm still working on this, by the way. Okay, but this is what I'm going to give you. What I want you to do is replicate that PDF timesheet in this format. Okay, so the idea here is let me show you what I've done here. I'm not going to teach you. Well, I can show you how I'm doing all this in Excel, but that's not the point. That's the other thing I've always been disappointed about with these timesheets is I think everyone's spending so much time trying to make the timesheet that there's no time left to actually think about what the timesheet means. I'd rather you spend the time thinking about what the timesheet means and figure out how to make it. Does that make sense? Yes, Kate?
So is this gonna, when you finish making this
Yeah.
idea, is this gonna be the new way to do timesheets?
Maybe.
Because the way timesheets are done right now is very different and much easier to understand.
Well, let me take you through what this looks like, what's going on here.
Okay.
Okay? So before you judge it, let me tell you what's going on. So let me first, I've just got some examples here. So what I want to do is do some shading here to kind of make this a little bit easier to read. But the idea here is that each one of these little blocks represents a week, okay? And here are the different days of the week, and this is a timesheet for one person, okay? And you could potentially have 3 different times that day that you're calling them in, right? So you could do 3 different calls, hopefully you're not doing that very often. But you could do like a 9 to 1, a 2 to 6, a 7 to 11, right? That'd be 3 different calls. So I've got room to do that. So here's like on this Monday, I'm saying, all right, I'm going to call them in from 2. They're going to come in at 2. They're going to leave at 6. Great, and that's it. I'm not calling. But here on this Wednesday, I'm going to call them from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m., and then I'm going to call them again from 7 to 11 p.m., okay? And what's happening is Excel is automatically figuring out that, okay, that's 4 hours there, and that's 4 hours there, which is a total of 8 hours for that day. Okay, so it's doing some of that math for you. And then it's actually going in and saying, okay, here's the total number of hours you're planning to work them, and here's how that breaks down for the weekly average, which in this case is the same because this is week 1. Okay? But let me show you how this works. So ultimately, you would just clear these out. So if you just select these cells that have the actual times and just right-click and say Clear Contents, then go over here and clear this out. Now you've got now this is a little bit different. So what I'd like to do is I need to figure out how to shade this, because this now makes a bit more sense even now that we don't have all those times in there. It's easier to see what's going on. So in some ways, it might be that I go in and shade these, right? So I could say, all right, well, this will be that one, and I'll turn on the grid lines for that. And then this one will be another one, so that'll be maybe that. So before long, this becomes a little bit.
Oh, these are such depressing colors, though.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not thinking much about the colors yet. I'm just.
It's a sad hospital color palette.
Right. So that helps you break it up a little bit. But the idea here is, so as you're going through this, you're just going to say, all right, on Monday, I'm going to bring this person in, and you can pull in. It's got a drop-down menu here, and you can select the time you're going to bring them in. Bring them in at 2. And then I'm going to send them away at 6 o'clock. And right now, I've got this menu set up to start at 8 a.m., but if you want to change that, you can go over here and say, look, the earliest I'm ever going to bring anybody in is going to be 10 a.m. Right? Then you go into here, and now your menu starts at 10, right?
Wait, can you do that again?
So go over to this thing here, and this is where the menu is. So you just enter the earliest call time here. Like, so what's the earliest you're ever going to bring anybody in? Okay? So you can just say, maybe it's 2 p.m. is the earliest you're ever going to bring anybody in. Right? And it'll just populate it down, and it's going to give you, times that you're never going to use, but it's just like, where do you start from? Okay. So now I'm starting from 2 and I go to 6. Okay. And then maybe that day I'm also going to bring them in. We're going to take a dinner break. I'm going to bring them back at 8. And send them home at 10. We'll do 2 hours there. And then we're done. So that's a total of, it's a 4-hour call and a 2-hour call. And that's a total of 6 hours that day. Which so far is 6 hours for the week. And that's averaging out to 6. But I could go then on Tuesday, maybe we'll do a 7 to an 11. And then we're done for that day, right? So you see, you can kind of see how this is going. Now the other thing you can do is you can, up here for this timesheet, you can put in a start date. So like, what is the first day that we're going to work? Okay, and you can just put that in there, and then all these dates will populate as well as the days of the week. So I can say, I'm actually going to start on, well, let's see here. So maybe this is for a show. We're going to start working that week of Labor Day, right? So I'll say, all right, so I'm just going to say September 2nd, 9/2/19. Okay, and then it automatically populates. And I started on a Monday, but if I said 9/3/19, then it's going to start everything on Tuesday because it's going to give me 7 days of the week. Okay. So I'm doing a lot of really cool, hocus pocus here.
This is great.
A lot of cool Excel magic here to make this work. So, yes, Kate, I agree with you. I have not yet nailed the appearance of this. Okay, like that part I'm still working on.
Okay.
But the goal here is to make creating the timesheet really easy, so that you are actually spending your time thinking about the really important part, which is, when am I going to work everybody, and how do I make sure I'm not killing them?
So then this timesheet you would have, like, because in the one that we're using right now, there's multiple tabs, but the tabs are used as the weeks, and then you have the initials of like every single person.
Yeah, everybody does their own, everyone's got their own little slightly weird way of doing these things.
But like this one would be one tab is for one person.
Yeah.
And then another tab is for a separate person.
Correct.
Okay.
So right now I've got this built out to 10 weeks, because I'm thinking there's probably never a project we're going to do that's going to be longer than that. But if it was, we could just copy and we could populate this. But yes, if the other thing you can do is say, what's my budget for this person? Like, how many hours am I allowed to work this person? So right now I've put in 20 hours a week that I can put this person, which means if I ever go past 20, watch what happens. So I'm going to kick this person into overtime.
Computer science.
So I'm going to put them 2 to...
Like, do like 6 a.m.
I'm going to go from 2 p.m. and send them home at 11 on that Wednesday. And then on Thursday, I'm going to do another one of those. 2 to 11. And boom! This went red. Because it's now 28 hours that week, which is more than what I'm allowed to work with them for, right? Because they're only supposed to work 20. But maybe if my budget is only 30 for them, right, then I'm okay, right? But if I only am allowed to work them 20 hours, then it's going to warn me about that. But then if you look down here, I'm not in the red because I haven't scheduled them for any time at all in week 2, which means now my average for the week is only 14, so I'm not in overtime anymore. Okay. So as you start filling these in, ultimately you'll get down to that last week that you're working, and you'll see what that weekly average is planned, and that will be your average based on the aggregate of all the weeks, and that'll tell you, okay, if you're still in the red at that point, then you've got to go back and fix something, because you're either way overestimating how much time things are going to take, or you're being really abusive, and you've got to figure out a way to not burn up these people. Okay. So once you've got that, then so that would be your prediction, and then as you go through each day, you can start recording when that person actually worked, right? So I would go in and say, well, okay, I brought them in at 2 o'clock, but then it really only took us until 4 to get done with what we needed to do, so that was only 2 hours, right? And so now you look at, and then we were done, actually. I didn't have to do anything else that week. Okay, you say, oh, well, okay, so I thought this was going to be 28 hours. I was going to go into overtime, but in reality, we were done in 2 hours. And you can see that over the right. So, okay, well, obviously, I way overestimated how long this was going to take, and next time I won't do that. Okay, you see how that works? Now, the other thing I'm working on, as you can see, here is a little graph that I'm playing around with that tries to show this in a view that maybe might be, we're still working on this, Because what I want to do, the part I haven't quite figured out yet is I haven't figured out how to show because this is the predicted or the planned hours, and I want to show the actuals right next to it in the graph. I haven't quite figured out how to do that yet. So I might have to have a second graph for that. But you can have a graph of that for every week. Just so that, because some people, this makes more sense, right? You can look at that and go and get a better sense of like what you're doing and when you're working, right? And then we could create a full graph that aggregated all the weeks or something, and I'll work on that. But most of this is just kind of a proof of concept.
Just saying.
Yeah.
You can do it in Google Sheets.
Oh my god.
All right. They'll put the side by side together. Like that.
Can you do the rest of this in Google Sheets, or is it just the insertion of a single graph?
You think I know how to use Google Sheets?
Yeah, I'm not sure
Your
you really know what you're
argument
talking
is
about there.
disintegrating.
I'm
sure that there's
what's
my-
There's a way to do it. I just haven't figured it out.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a way to do it. I just have not worked out the way yet. Yes.
What does the different colors mean on the graph again?
Nothing yet.
Nothing yet.
Those
Okay.
are just default colors.
You're getting too far ahead.
Well, why are there two different colors?
Well, because on this day I had 2 calls, right?
Okay.
So on Monday I was predicting a 2 to 6 and what did I say? 8 to 10.
And that's why it's two.
2 to 6, 8 to 10. So it's a different color because it's a second sort of thing, but ultimately I'll tweak that so it's the same color.
Okay.
Because what I want to do is I want to have like the predicted as one color and then right next to it the actuals in
Right.
different colors. I just haven't figured that part out yet. And I got to get the scaling of the time scale to make a little bit more sense because it's not quite there. It's good. It's much better than it was before, but I'm getting there. But the good news is that like once you have the data in the spreadsheet, then making the graph is like you can change the graph anytime you want. It's no big deal. Okay. So yes. Now, what if I want to do another person? Watch this. You're just going to right-click on this little tab and say Move or Copy. And check this box, Create a Copy. And it says place it before which sheet. I'm going to place it before this sheet 6. There we go. Got a copy. So Kelsey is my daughter's name. So and then one of my sons is named Connor. So this will be
Your daughter to death. 28
this will
hours.
be Connor's timesheet. So I'll just say Connor. Connor, I can work 30 hours a week. And I'll just start over, right? So I can just go in and select these times, and I'll just say clear, contents, clear. I could make a button that would clear these automatically. I just haven't done that yet. Okay, but now I can start filling out the timesheet for Connor, right? And all of this sort of populates over. And, here's my empty graph because I don't have anything planned yet, but you get the idea. Okay, so how are we doing so far?
Good.
Okay.
I retract my statement if I don't like it.
Okay. So yes, I will make it look slicker, but my goal here is to try to get you to care about, pay more attention to the parts that are more important, and we can make the slickness can come in a minute here, because I do care about it looking slick, that's my earlier speech might imply. I do care about that, but I want to make sure we got the information and the process down right first. So that's what I want you to do for now. Is I want you to take that PDF I showed you, that timesheet, and I want you to replicate that same information here in this spreadsheet, right? Because I'm not expecting you to figure out what's time and crew and all that kind of stuff. That's later when you're an A1 or something here. I'm schedule people. For now, I just want you to be able to understand enough about how a timesheet works that you can make one. Okay? So I've shown you a timesheet that's formatted differently. Take the information out of that, plug that same information into here, and kick it back to me. Right? That's all I need you to do. All right? And I don't think I'll take you. This one shouldn't take too long to do. So what I want to do is I just want to show you a little bit about how I'm doing this, in case because I thought about making you guys build your own that does this, but I thought that'd be really cool. and that doesn't really matter because I don't really care
That
about
would
that.
take so long.
I don't really care about that. That's not the point of what I'm doing. So let me just show you what I'm doing here and how this does what it's doing. So first of all, you need to know that in Excel is all about data, right? And so, but it can look at data in lots of different ways. So if I, like this here's just an empty cell. And if I go to this format and go to cells, I can format this in lots of different ways. This can be a number, this can be currency, this can be dates, times, fractions, all kinds of things. So this, for example, is formatted as a date. So if I pull up the format cells, you'll see I have this set up as a date with this particular format of time, okay? Now, under the hood, that's a different number. If I actually just show it as a number, that's what it is. So this is the way that Excel figures out dates. But I just want to present that in a date format that makes sense to me. But because under the hood it's this weird number, then that means Excel can do math on it. Okay? So one of the things that Excel can do is, for example, there's a function in Excel called text. Okay? Let's see what that does. So if you just go in here and type text, oops, hang on, equals no. Oh, there we go. So let's take a look at what text does. Text function lets you change the way a number appears by applying formatting to it with format codes. So in this case, I'm using the code DDDD, which is the day of the week. So if I put DDDD in, then it will convert that number. It will consult the world calendar, and it will say, that particular date happens to fall on a Monday. And therefore, it will draw the word Monday. So that's what's happening here. So I have text, and then in parentheses B6, which is this cell. This is cell B6. So I'm saying convert whatever in B6 to text using the day format. Okay? So that's how Monday comes. That's why when I change it, when I say I actually want to start on October 1st, 2019, it says, oh, well, that's a Tuesday. Right?
Why did it freak out down there?
I think it just ran out of room.
I was like,
It's just a bigger date, couldn't fit. So that's what's going on there. So 119. Okay? So that's what's going. Now what's happening here is this value, I'm just saying, give me B6, which is this cell, plus 1 day. So what I did is I put this one in, and then I put this in, B6 plus 1, and then I just drug these cells down. And then I copied and copied and copied. So this one is B19 plus 1. This one is B20 plus 1. So it just takes, look at the day before and add 1 day to it. That way, all I have to do is change the start date, and it, boom, automatically populates everything down. And then all these days of the week are just look at the cell next to you, convert that to text based on what the calendar says that day would be. Okay? Make sense? Great. And then I've got this thing called hours, where I'm saying that's just the total hours for that particular call. And the way that works is you can see that I'm just saying take D6, which is the out time, and subtract the start time from it. Subtract C6. And that would give me the number of hours, right? But because ultimately this is going to be displayed in time, but under the hood it's just a number, because I formatted it. If you look at the format of this cell, it's a time, 1:30 p.m. I formatted it as time. But under the hood it's a number. Then we can do math on it, and that'll tell me the total number of hours. And then for the break, what I'm doing is I'm just saying, well, the break would be the difference between when I bring them in for the second call and when I let them leave for the first call. So I just did G6 minus D6, and that gives me the time of the break.
Oh.
Right? And then I just repeated that over here for 2 more calls. And then I did the total hours is, now I could also just add up the, because I created this formula before I did the hours, but this is a good double check. Rather than, I could just say, give me the sum of E6, I6, and M6. But instead, I just had it go ahead and do that math again. So I said, D6 minus C6 plus H6 minus G6. So I'm doing that math again. It's a good way to check, because just in case you make a mistake and put a bit of data in somewhere wrong, ideally these numbers should add up correctly, and if they don't, then it's just a good way of checking your data. So that's how you're getting the plan total. And then the weekly total is just the sum of those total for each day, right? Sum of N6 plus N12, okay? Weekly average is, there's actual function here called average, and I do the average of whatever the cells are. So in this case, it's just 1. But if I go down here to the next week, it's the average of N13 and N25, which are my 2 totals for those 2 weeks, right? And if we go all the way down here to week 10, I'm doing the average of all of those cells, right? All of my weekly totals averages out into that one cell, okay? And then I just repeated that process for the actuals, just copied those over, and everything's fine. Now, how did I do the turn it red if I go into overtime? A conditional format. I did a conditional format. So if you click on that cell and click this conditional formatting thing, or actually go over at format and say conditional formatting, you'll see I have this rule. And the rule is, if the value of this cell is greater than the value of cell B2, then make it format it this way, okay? And what is B2?
Total hours.
Total hours I'm allowed to work them a week, okay? So if that number that ever pops into that cell is ever larger than the cell in B2, then it's going to say, boom, red. You just hurt the person, right? Because I want to know that. I want to know that if what I'm predicting is going to be.
Can we have a pop-up box that just says, you just hurt Kelsey?
Yeah. Right. I could. I'll probably do that. I can figure that out.
That'd be hilarious. You should do it.
All right. So let's see. How am I doing the drop-down menus? Okay, so I went over here to this other sheet and just made that list. Now, how did I make that list? Well, I started with just putting a time in. I formatted these cells as time. And then here, I just said, do A1 plus the time format, because time is a function, and this is hours, minutes, seconds. Okay? So I'm just saying, give me the time that would be the time of the first cell plus 15 minutes. Right? And then I just copy that down. So this is A3 plus 15 minutes, A4 plus 15 minutes, blah, 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 which means all I have to do is change the first one. If I say, well, the earliest I'm going to bring somebody in would be 9 a.m., then boom, it populates everything down. So now I've got my list. Then what I did is you go into this cell, like I'll make another drop-down menu. I'll put it right here. So if you go here, and you go over here to data, there's this thing called data validation. So in the data tab here, there's a thing called data validation. You can also get it here in the menu, data validation. So you hit data validation, and you say validation criteria. I'm going to say I want a list. And what is the source for this list? Well, you click on this thing, and now you can go over to this sheet and say it would be this. There's my list. And you hit enter and click OK. And now I've got this drop down that is that list. And it live updates if I change this. So if I change these values, that list will live update because it's linked to that data source. Okay? So I did that. I just selected all of these cells. So I just went through and went you and you. you, right? And I selected them all and did that conditional format for all of them in one fell swoop, and it popped all those menus in there for me. Yes?
I was just saying, do you think you could put this like on the server or something so we could just mess around with it?
I gave it to you.
Oh,
You
we
have
do have it? We do have it in there? Oh, awesome.
Well, it's
Like
on.
the
It's
one
on.
with all the
It's on
conditional
Canvas.
formatting?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I gave you this file.
Awesome.
Pretty, I know there's a lot going on right now, but we're using this file to do the thing, or we're making
Yes,
it up?
you're using this one.
Okay, so
So if you go onto Canvas and look at the assignment is download this file and download the PDF of that other show's timesheet and recreate that timesheet in this Excel file. Yes.
So the PDF,
Yes.
the dates don't make sense.
What do you mean?
Like the very first day that it starts is December 5th, which is in 2016. If it's on Monday,
This was 2009.
That would make sense. Okay. But then following Monday is 10 days later, and like
No, Sunday, January 4th, and then Monday, January 5th. January 4th to January 5th. Right? Oh, I see. On this one, it messed up. Yeah. So on the first page, we're going from December 11th to December 15th.
yeah.
the dates still matter. Everything.
So it happens, I think, on like the first 3 pages where it's
Yeah. So I would.
Everything's useless.
So I think I would say that for purposes of recreating this, pretend that it's happening now,
okay,
right? So just pick an arbitrary start date
and then just go.
and then just go with it, right? Yeah, I would just do that. Pay attention to the Monday through Friday, Monday through Sunday thing. I don't care what day you start at, though. This can be a hypothetical show, but you're going to do it with this schedule, basically. Okay. Okay, the graph. You want to see how the graph works? So it would work better if I just built it, okay? So let me show you. The first thing I would do is I selected. Well, let me put some date. Let me put some times in here first, just so you can see how that works. So we'll do a 1 to 5:30. I'm just picking some ones at random here. 11:30. There we go. Maybe I'll bring him in for a second call on this day. 10:45 to 11:45. And actually, I would have to do that later. That would have to be. I'll have to bring him in at 7 till 11:30. We'll do that. Okay. So there's a couple. So what I would do is I'd first start by saying, all right, this is the first set of times, and I'm going to make a what's called a stacked column graph. Okay. This is very tricky what I'm doing because I'm both graphing things and then hiding the things I graphed to make it look the way it looks. Okay. So I'm going to make a stacked graph. Here it is. I'm gonna put it over here. Actually, I'll just set it here. And then I need to, let's see. So I'm going to go into here. If I right-click on this and say select data, I'm going to. It didn't quite make that the way I thought it would. Let me try that again. So if I do this, I'm going to insert a chart. No, it did. Okay, I'll fix it. So what I want this to be is get rid of that, make a new one, and so new series, and then the Y values for this are going to be that. Okay. And then the horizontal values, which are these, I'm going to have those be can do that, or actually I'll do the dates. Okay. So there we go. I've made a graph, right? What this graph shows is starting at the beginning of the day, which is 12 a.m., then the actual value ends at that graph, right? See that? Not yet exactly what I'm trying to do, but it's a start. Okay? So then the next thing I want to know is I'm going to add another bit of data to this. So I'm going to put another series, and in this case, I'm going to select the total number of hours of that call. And click OK. And you see how now I've got that extra little bit? Well, guess what? That orange bit is the call. That's the amount of time they worked, right?
That's the actual?
Yeah, because the end of this is the end of the call, right? Because I just said, draw me a new bar that is these number of hours further up than that first one. So now what I got to do is I just have to hide this. Okay, so I'm going to click on this first set of data, and I'm going to format it, and I'm going to say no fill. Don't show that. Okay, so I'm graphing it and then hiding it, and now I can see the actual call and thing. And then you can go in and you can tweak these times, because ultimately it's backwards right now. It's starting at the beginning of the day is at the bottom, and I don't want that. So if I go to this left area here and go to this thing, this axis, I can say put them in reverse order, and now this makes more sense, right? So now the beginning of the day is at the top, and the end of the day is at the bottom, and here's what I'm working on, okay? And I could keep adding series into that to give me the other calls, right? So I could say, okay, now give me the break, now give me, or give me the start of the next call, give me the length of that call, and I could keep stacking these in and hiding the bits when they don't work, okay? And then I'd get ultimately what I have over here, which was showing me both things, okay? So that's the idea. What I need to do is I just have to build that out a little bit further to get all three calls in, and then I have to add the actuals and try to get that into one graph. I just haven't figured that part out yet. But I will. I'm sure there's a way. Must be a way. Excel is a very clever program. I'm sure that I can figure that out. I just don't know yet exactly how to do that. But I will. So yeah, I'm doing a lot of sort of clever stuff here, but that's not super important to the purpose of what I want you to do this week. What I want you to do this week is just wrangle this a little bit, just fill this in, start making a timesheet, and then so just turn in that Excel file, and we'll worry later about how to format this and make it look pretty. We'll do that for the final project, okay? And maybe by then I'll have the spreadsheet in better shape. Because the 6 hours I spent replacing the sound system for Still Excellent today was the 6 hours I was supposed to spend finishing those graphs there. So sorry about that. But I will. So your assignment is to just replicate that timesheet for all the people and all the days. I don't care what start date you use, but just implement that schedule with both predicted and actual, just so you can kind of get used to plugging times in and looking how that goes. And we'll see what you come up with. And if you want to play around with the formatting of it, go for it. You know, if you can make this thing look prettier, or if you want to start wrangling those graphs or whatever, go for it. I'd love to see what you come up with. If you feel like you're comfortable enough with Excel that you want to play around with that, go for it. I'd love to see, maybe you'll have better ideas than I had about making it easier to read or easier to look at or whatever. Okay? There you go. That's your project. So we'll do rigging diagrams next week, okay? So even though the syllabus says the opposite, we're doing this instead, okay? Just want to be clear about that.